Um, Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Ethics Lab webinar. My name is Anya Nyamjo. I'm a Senior Research Officer at the Ethics Lab. And amongst several other activities, I coordinate this webinar series that, broadly speaking, are about leveraging the African humanities to think critically about the ethical questions posed by new and emerging technologies. I am grateful that we have Uyiosa Omoregie, sorry, from the Avram Turing. He's going to speak for about 25 minutes or so, and then we'll have the discussion proceed into comments, questions. Today he'll be talking about how African indigenous indigenous knowledge more generally can help us think about some of the critical concepts constitutive of artificial intelligence, like computation, amongst others, and more generally what African thought can contribute to um, uh, the ethics of artificial intelligence. Uyiosa is a researcher and analyst whose work examines computation, AI ethics, and knowledge systems from African and philosophical perspectives. He is a co-author of Misinformation Matters, Online Content and Quality Analysis, and has also written on Ifá binary computation as a structured knowledge system with implications for contemporary debates on digital governance and computation. You're welcome to, before I hand over to Uyi, you're welcome to keep your cameras. This event is being recorded, so you're welcome to keep your cameras off. But I do hope that when we do move to the discussion and comments, you'll make this a bit more of a personal encounter so that we're not just staring at letters on on the screen. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Uyi.
Right. Thank you, Anya, for that kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be part of this conversation. And today I want to, explore a simple but important question. And what do we mean when we say something's computational? And specifically, I want to focus on something that, got my mind, running around recently over the past 2-3 years. That's the Ifá system, knowledge system. It's known in Nigeria and around the world as generally as a religious, cultural, shall I say, phenomenon or system. But as I just stumbled across certain researches about it, I found it really interesting, the computational aspects. So I'm going to approach it from that point of view. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm actually, from the natural sciences, in fact. And but I'm a curious researcher, an independent researcher, and I researched this quite a bit over the past few years, and there's certain things I find really, really interesting. So it's Ifá, AI, and the politics of intelligence. Right. Technology exists today that produces knowledge. It uses probability, runs on binary structures, draws from a large corpus of data. It answers questions, it makes predictions, and supports decision-making. Some even suggest it approaches something like intelligence or sentience. Now, most people would think I'm describing GPT or Claude or Copilot, but I'm actually describing Ifá, a centuries-old African knowledge system. So the difference between Ifá and these other systems that that are known to everybody else as artificial intelligence is not capability. The difference is recognition. So what is this Ifá system? It's from the Yoruba region of Nigeria, West Africa. Yoruba transcends Nigeria, it goes into Benin, the country as well. And but it's Yoruba in origin, you know. It uses binary code, and that's really important because binary code is the foundation of computer science. The patron saint, if I should call him that, of computer science, Gottfried Leibniz in the 17th century, 16th century. You know, he basically discovered binary arithmetic uh, from the Chinese, from the I Ching system, which is a divination system. And then from there, he was inspired to create binary arithmetic, which is the foundation of computer science. It's the foundation of what Alan Turing, who's usually called the father of computer science, used to develop the Turing machines. That's basically, you know, the kind of first theoretical computer. And it's also the binary code is also the foundation of what Claude Shannon, who's called the father of the information age, used to create circuits by which computer hardware, operate. So IFA has uses binary code and 8-bit structure and vast corpus to generate predictive insights, and that's really important. It's about insight. It's about decision supports. So when you talk about the substrate, you talk about the Bella chain, the open IFA tray, they all look really kind of primitive, as many people would describe them, but you know, the substrate is not important, it's the structure. So these generate an 8-bit sequence that corresponds to one of 256 possible outcomes. And that's really important, that number 256. And each Odu maps to a collection of oral verses picking up a database. So despite this, I mean, I just described the structure of the IFA system. It's not really acknowledged within the broader scientific discourse around technology and computation. And even though it's a decision support system and produces a coded output mapped to narrative data, and it's interpreted by a trained practitioner to address human questions dilemma, it's not mystical, it's algorithmic, it functions with structure, precision, probabilistic input. And as one researcher, I can't remember his name now, I referenced him in my paper. He said that, look, divination has been around for a long time, but what we call artificial intelligence, AI, especially LLMs, what they really are digital. What they really do is digital divination. So that word divination should not scare us. It's part of everyday computer science. So at the heart of this discussion really is, how do we define computation? It's should I say, the knee-jerk definition would be on calculating things, compute. I think the first computers were actually human beings, ladies mostly. But computation is more than that. It's more than calculation. It is actually about transforming inputs into outputs. And I like the way Loyola Marymount University described it in the website, that it's the mechanical generation of new information from old information. But if you go to the dictionary, it tells you that it's the act of computing and calculation. And Ian Holswell gives a really good definition. He wrote a whole paper about this, how do you define computation, and he says it's a process that produces the right results. No, that's fair enough. And it could be mechanical, mental, or biological. So this is what inspired me to start researching this is when I came across this book by Olulonge. He's a Nigerian, first Nigerian professor of computer science. I came across it while I was researching for my book, Misinformation Matters, online quality and online quality analysis. And somehow I came across this book. I can't really remember what I think it was on Twitter, yes. And it really got me going. I had first seen Ifá mentioned in a presentation about binary computation, binary arithmetic. They mentioned that binary arithmetic predates Gottfried Leibniz. It actually goes back to other systems like the Chinese I-Ching divination system, which is binary, and then they mentioned the Ifá system, and I was like, really? Connection between the Ifá and computer science. Anyway, Olulonga, in his inaugural lecture, talked about Ifá divination and computer science, and he was educated mostly in the West, so he not like he was from a really traditional cultural, was coming from that point of view. No, he was trained in computer science, and he published. This book was published about 15 years after the lecture. It's a really obscure 50-page, should I call it a pamphlet, that I think was revolutionary, and it doesn't get the credit that it deserves. He makes an almost secret and powerful claim like no other in the history of African computer systems. And it was a bold intellectual move, and it situated the Yoruba Ifá divination system beside Western computational system. And that's important. Beside, I'll get to that later. He didn't say it's above Western system, and he didn't say it's below. So he came up with, he in the little book, he shows the similarities, okay? And apart from the fact that it's binary and it uses statistical computation for decision making, he showed 6 concepts that are similar that you find in computer science that you also find in the Ifá system. And that includes the binary digit, representation of basic characters, coding, Boolean, algebra and logic, memory organization, and addressing on matrices. And to any computer science, this is like the foundation. This is what defines the field. And all that, he showed that it's, you see it in the Ifá system. So outsiders generally look at the Ifá system as a spiritual practice, religious system. It's revered. It is a religious system. It is a spiritual practice, but it's more than that. It's just like, I don't know, I don't want to talk about religion here, but I mean, I'm a Christian. So when I look at the Bible, yes, I see the word of God, I see religious spirituality, but I also see morality. I see concepts about economics, about ethics. I see concepts, I see history, I see all that. It's all in there, So that doesn't mean that the Bible is just about ethics, but ethics is contained in it. So people should also see the Ifá system as that as well. So it's he did all that before the current emphasis today on decolonizing science, decolonizing artificial intelligence, and calls for epistemic justice really became mainstream. He showed all this, so it was really radical. And this is a quote from his book. So he talks about the basic unit of data and addressing. And in computer science, it was only in 1964 that the 8-bit byte was adopted as a standard unit. But in the in the first system, it was 8-bit byte as a standard unit centuries before 1964. And then there's this Finnish programmer from Finland called Visno. and he's not said that 8 bits is not merely the length of an Ifá, but also the word length of the microcomputer revolution. So that's a very serious connection between the Ifá system and computer science. So in this presentation, I use AI a lot deliberately, provocatively. Some people may not like it, but it's about AI, it's about technology, computation, to create certain, I use it to create certain images that I think are, informative. I see them also as works of art. It kind of reminds me of paintings of Basquiat, who is also someone who challenged the dominant systems of art and representation. So, the question of what is computation knowledge and technology, who decides? And many people may not realize it. Like one brother mentioned, Alaka Oluwatumbi, he said that intellectualism has never been innocent. Like colonialism did not spread knowledge, it reclassified it. That's a radical claim. And what he meant by that, knowledge already existed in colonized places, and it was just a matter of who decide what counts as knowledge and legitimacy. And then you cannot remove coloniality from the discussion. And I'm not about bashing Western systems and knowledge systems, but in fact, you can't run away from the fact that as Mavunga, one of my mentors at MIT, is a professor at MIT, says that there's an asymmetry of definition of power. That's the ability of dominant cultures to determine what counts as science or technology. And the result is that knowledge systems like Ifá have been overlooked for centuries by the scientific community. Now, one question that I get asked a lot, from family members, mostly from Africans, not really from the West, is that, okay, the Ifá was so great technology and all that, why did it not develop Africa? It's something that, if it was so advanced for its time, why did it not lead to technological industrial development? That's a valid critique, and any serious promoter of Western knowledge system can't run away from that. You have to wrestle with it. And why did they find not diffuse knowledge and the technological advancement throughout Africa? So the roadblock really was somewhere between knowledge capacity and institutional transition. And very interestingly, the current Nobel laureates for economics who won it last year, one of the winners who shared half the prize is Joe Mokia. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation. He distinguished between propositional knowledge and prescriptive knowledge, for the understanding of useful knowledge. And what was key is that there was a feedback loop between these two different kinds of knowledges that resulted in development. And that feedback knowledge was lacking in Africa. Indigenous knowledge existed mainly as propositional knowledge, really, and not much aligned with prescriptive knowledge. And when the colonialists arrived, they came with their own prescriptive knowledge and imposed it. So there was no epistemic integration with knowledge systems like the Ifá. But today, there is an opportunity to make indigenous systems like Ifá inform engineering, digital systems, and institutional feedback loops can be created today. Well, there were great feats of technological achievements in Africa, so we can't say there wasn't any. They're not discussed most of the time, but if you ask someone what was the largest man-made structure prior to the mechanical age, they'll probably say the wall of China, I don't know, or something else. But it was actually in Africa, in West Africa, in Benin. It's in the Guinness Book of Records in 1976 edition. It's the largest man-made structure prior to the mechanical era. It was massive, and it was a great feat of technological um, engineering. And one thing to understand is that African knowledge systems and Western knowledge systems, especially at that time, served different purposes. Francis Bacon, who was not a figure of the Enlightenment, but a key precursor, believed that knowledge was power over nature. But African knowledge systems are more focused on life within nature. Just like the Ifá system is focused more on the individual being in harmony with the community. That's really different. So cosmic alignment, spirituality, ethics are paramount to African knowledge systems like Ifá. In the Ifá system, the Yoruba word Imo, roughly translated as knowledge, has to be accompanied with Iwa, which is character, and the two go together. I'll have to rush through a little bit now because I don't have much time left. And in the ancient city-state of Benin, it was developed, and in what is in southern Nigeria today, they were the first civilization to have what resembled streetlights, and they were powered by palm oil, and they were like tall metal lamps, and the planning and design was also highly advanced with mathematical asymmetry that's today is known as fractal design. Now, I kind of like approach my inquiry into Ifá through Afrofuturism, which is really about reclaiming and recontextualizing the past to redefine, technology, Black innovation, and a connection with people shared Black ancestry, and looking forward into the future. And for anybody that wants to really understand Afrofuturism in a very basic, simple way, watch the movie Black Panther. It's really about Afrofuturism. So rather than a relic from the past, IFA is a living system relevant today that can inform technology for the future. That's Afrofuturism, past, today, and future. Afrofuturism is actually concerned with reclaiming or recontextualizing the past, assessing the history of Black people to construct an imagined future. It's about imagined futures. It's a philosophy and epistemology and aesthetics, and it's connected with Black diaspora, Black innovation, intellectualism, diasporic knowledge used to define technology, reconnect people of shared ancestry. It's a deliberate shift in perspective, a lens through which technological progress and its origins in a way that challenges the dominant narratives. So it's a reimagination. So this is just a graphic that I like very much. It looks really like a painting, talking about Afrofuturism, connecting and reimagining the future. So the issue now is this. There's what I call a Fanonian imperative, which is from Frantz Fanon in his book, The Wretched of the Earth. People approach Fanon mostly as a radical revolutionary political figure, yes, who had advocated violence, yes, but I'm not coming from that aspect of him. His epistemological imperative that you find in his book about turning a new leaf, and it means avoiding blind imitation of Western dominant systems that colonized people, should move on and create new concepts, and without rejecting automatically Western concepts and narratives, especially regarding technology, but also avoid what he called, I think, sterile litanies and blindless mimicry. That's the word. I think that's the phrase used. So basically, come up with something new, learn from the West. There should be mutuality, and that's how you have achieve real progress. It's an epistemic lesson from him, from his book, The Wretched of the Earth. And create new concepts, avoid knee-jerk dismissal of Western or any other knowledge system, but at the same time, don't blindly imitate them. Now, this is a point that I think is really important about voodoo. When you say voodoo, most people think about, African, black magic, but, computers were regarded as voodoo at one time, like the computer scientist at DB Tunai, shared in a post on LinkedIn. He said there was a time not so long ago when computers were regarded as voodoo. People knew they worked, they just could not explain how. The machine sat there, cryptic, humming, and output emerged like prophecies. You fed it cards and gave you answers. The inner workings, that was left for the priests, programmers, the engineers, ones who understood the incantations. We laughed at this later. We called it ignorance. We told ourselves we had demystified the machine, but we replaced it with something else, which is AI. So we've circled back to voodoo. And there's a book that was written by what's his name now? A very famous computer scientist, and recently about ChatGTP. And there's a part of it, very small book. Can't remember his name now. And there's a part where he gets to, and he says that I've explained ChatGTP how it works, but there's a particular area. When he gets to that area, he says, this is where the voodoo comes in. Basically, he couldn't explain it, the black box issue. Interestingly, Ifá was always derided, demonized as voodoo, but guess what? Computer science was also regarded as voodoo not too long ago. So this is a quote from Frantz Fanon, that talks about the importance of knowledge creation, the importance of the community in knowledge creation. The community plays a central part of it. It's not an individual issue, just like the philosophy of Ubuntu. So the FAST system, plays an important role in knowledge creation. There's no output without interpretation from the system, no knowledge without responsibility, and there's no algorithm without context. So this is comparing the FAST system with modern AI. Now, when I say compare, I'm not saying the FAST system is greater or less. I'm putting them side by side. So the dominant paradigm of everyday computation is in crisis today, and there's an ethical cost, too much dependence on algorithms, and the black box syndrome I just mentioned, and questionable decisions are made. But in the FAST system, when a client contacts the Babalao, the practitioner, the output is always contextual. Community elders are consulted, and ethical prescriptions are tailored to the individual in a living way. And like I said earlier, the whole point is to make sure the individual is in harmony with the greater with the community. So moving towards an Ifá model as prototype to envision a future technology is definitely a speculative leap in the spirit of Afrofuturism. So the next part of this presentation talks about criticisms about indigenous systems and so on, the FAST system in particular. I like this quote from Amy. We need to understand. We need to think about what we count as knowledge, and is it all about abstract systems, about libraries in the West? Knowledge is broader than that. So one question is usually, is knowledge as justified true belief. There's no such thing as fundamentally different indigenous knowledge system. And there shouldn't be epistemological relativism. That's one of the biggest critiques about systems, indigenous systems, and there should be relativism, But if the truth is, intellectualism is never innocent. It's curated, it's validated through power, and rarely co-authored. And European modernity did not discover reason. They only monopolized it. But from an African perspective, knowledge is not merely belief, justification, and truth. It's the relational aspect, interpretive aspect, it's performative, and it's situational. And there is no monoculture of epistemology, and there shouldn't be. So the African system and the Ifá system does not reject justified true belief. What it does is subordinates it within a broader structure. And for the African, knowledge is not static. It's not about whether a proposition is true or untrue. It's a process. It's situated, it's interpretive validation. There's a moral aspect to it. It's communal. And with a Ifá system, there are two dimensions called the Aye and Orun, both regarded as equally important. The visible world, material world, and the invisible world. That's how you look at it. Kind of like the mind and body, the mind affects the body affects the mind, that kind of thing. It's not spiritual. It's not, it's just something that we understand in Africa, and, it needs to be spread. So knowledge is empirically verifiable propositions, and it shouldn't be collapsed to mere belief, but you can't rule out belief in knowledge. So this is the Ifá divination. It's a computational interpretive system. It starts with input to generation, mapping, interpretation, validation, and action. It's not, it's often misunderstood as mere belief. It's not. It's actually computation interpretive. And there's a lot of coherence, and central to it is that narrative corpus and procedural, algorithmic aspect of the structure. So very quickly, on the left-hand side of this table is claims made against systems like Ifá, and on the right-hand side are kind of like responses, truth is multi-dimensional. It's the indigenous knowledge systems operate with a different epistemic architecture. And they'll say another thing is they will usually say it's conceptually weak. It's not conceptually weak. It's just different. It's not deficient in any way. So what's the practical relevance for AI? It broadens how we think about intelligence and decision systems. And I read a paper recently by Harvard, from Harvard, someone at Harvard University, and says that the key aspect of AI and the economy is it acts as a decision support system. That's what it really contributes to the economy, and that's what AI does. That's what the Ifá system does. It's a decision support system. So the implications for AI design, especially around interpretation, context, responsibility, those are really ethical issues, and then how we approach governance. So the second to last slide, and answering the question, who defines computation intelligence? The issue is not whether AI counts as real knowledge, within dominant system. It's about definition, and our current definitions, are they broad enough? And what we need to do is expand our understanding of what knowledge can be. And this will open new ways of thinking about computation, intelligence, and AI. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uyi. Yeah, really provocative. Really provocative contribution, and I can also appreciate the care with which you're trying to distinguish the serious versions or the serious implications of what you're saying versus the unserious ways in which, your claims could be taken, right? So, for example, you're not saying that Ifá is AI, or, that Africans invented computation, right? But you're trying to make the argument around, if we broaden our understanding of computation to think about non-Western intellectual traditions, how can that enrich some of the conversations that we're having today? And that's kind of where I want to jump in with an initial reflection before, and in so doing, open up the conversation to other people's comments and questions. I think the thing that has really struck me, both reading your work and listening to you now, is this, I guess, analogy with divination, or at least to position um, AI and computation within that framework of divination. And my observation is sort of following from our last webinar, from a webinar we had last month around a bit around AI and science communication. And the connection I want to make here is about the status of knowledge and the status of outputs. Whether so in the science communication case, you get two um, context for responsible communication. So you're also talking about a distinct kind of ethical responsibility here, right? So we can talk about AI as a tool of science communication and the way in which it talks about science with a kind of authority and the challenges of that, but also AI as a subject of science communication, the way in which we talk about its capacities. And both of these claims sort of show that the stake is about the authority and status of outputs. And what I'm hearing from your work is that in IFA, the output is never the end of the process, and that you don't come up the diviner doesn't come with a standalone answer that people can simply obey. That this has to be interpreted, and that this interpretation is done by someone with training and authority, and in a way that carries responsibility for what follows. And so the first thing that I just want you to maybe clarify, at least that's a thread I want to pull, is this relationship between outputs, interpretation, accountability. Because a lot of those uh, terms, accountability in particular, even just the authority of the knowledge generated are some of the key stakes today, whether we are talking about how, AI, generative AI is sycophantic, whether or not whether we're thinking about stakes like, does it make us dumber? Um, and then, if you could contrast that with, you know, so what if this relationship that IFA is making about outcome or a prediction, interpretation, and accountability, if you can contrast that with what modern or contemporary computing and AI um, looks like, because I think part of what I hear you saying is that we've sort of arrived at a moment in computational history where, at least in some accounts, outputs are seen as neutral or self-justifying, and that we can slip into taking recommendations and outputs as self-explanatory. And part of you taking this historiographical approach, this genealogical approach, is that this moment we find ourselves in is a cultural phenomenon. It's a path that, at least one way I hear your argument, it's a path that a Western history of computation has taken. It need not be like this, and we can learn um, to think about the ethical stakes when we, I guess, see outputs as things that don't stand on their own. And so, yeah, I'm curious about the ethical consequences that follow when responsibility shifts from interpreters and to the output itself. So a bit long-winded, and to put it simply, I'm just interested in what's the full extent of this divination analogy and this and you locating ethics in the context of interpretation. Whose responsibility it is to interpret? What does that interpretive responsibility look like? Where does one get the training is the training to interpret AI's results readily available to everyone? Like, yeah. because also what you're describing is a specialized group of people who have the knowledge to engage with a particular computational corpus, right? Which that knowledge is not necessarily um, in that context is not democratically available. And similarly here, we don't there's asymmetry in the in our respective abilities to actually engage critically with to develop critical interpretations of outputs. Sometimes the ways the technologies themselves are designed forestalls that critical interpretation because, like I mentioned, like it can be very sycophantic at times. So I'll end there. You don't have to respond to anything directly. It's if there is something you want to grab onto that, that's fine. But I just thought I'd offer an initial sense of some of the stakes that you've identified, but also use that to open the floor up to comments and questions as well. So you can, anyone who has anything to say, you can just raise your hand. While we wait for that, I guess maybe Uyi, you can just offer your own.
Yes, thank you, Anya, for that. I think I mean, you really hit is it the hammer on the nail? And sorry, am I clear? Because I'm using headphones now.
Yes,
you helped me to hear you clear. Yes, you really did. I mean, you touched on so many things there that are really central to, should I say, going forward, rather than just looking back, which I think is really important, especially within the Afrofuturist tradition and imperative. Now, I agree with everything you said and the importance. Where I would probably, be different is you mentioned something about the divination analogy. Yes, that's how it's been looked at, but I don't see it as an analogy. It's just a system. Divination is a system that should stand side by side with Western science, honestly. Science is not the only, what's the word now? Shouldn't be the only structure through which we look at knowledge, right? It's we need to say it through different ways. It's not like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the USA both have knowledge, about politics, but they look at it from two different areas, and you can't completely dismiss one and dismiss the other, or dismiss or they need to understand that they're coming from two different places and two different traditions, something like that. And what you mentioned is the moment of crisis in technology. And what's also very important is that Western computational systems are very good. They're fantastic, and there's a lot to learn from there. Alan Turing is my hero. Claude Shannon is. Gottfried Leibniz. I have more heroes within the Western tradition than in the African tradition. Funny enough. And but one thing I understand is that this thing called objectivity, which is kind of like central to what they were all trying to come with, it needed to happen. Just like the information age, right? Claude Shannon said something very important in his breakthrough paper, 1948, the mathematical theory of communication. He said the content of the message is not important. No, what is important is the message can go from one channel to the other, and be transmitted. And that's how the information age was born. Its quantity became more important than quality. Okay. But now we realize that it's with misinformation online and everything, shouldn't all be about quantity should also be about quality, right? And then that's when people like Ludwig Wittgenstein's philosophy become important. He talks about facts. The world is about facts. The reality is about facts. Bring facts into the front. Same thing with the AI today. It's developed Alan Turing. I mean, it was very kind of objective. It was he wasn't interested in meaning when he, developed the Turing machines and all that. It was just like, this can happen. We can compute this, and that was important. That was the foundation. We needed that to be able to develop computers and all that. But we've reached a stage where quality now becomes important. Okay, and systems like the IFA system, they have a lesson that mainstream computational systems can learn from, and that's about responsibility, ethics, and interpretation. And like you said, something like the interpretation is not democratically, applied. That's true. It's in the first system. There's a babalawo, basically the priest, the Ifa practitioner who interpret. But the elders are also involved. The elders of the community are also involved. I think I mentioned that in one of my slides. They are consulted. Even the ancestors are part of it. Okay, and there's a community mediation. So the key difference is that we can't totally say that Western systems don't think about interpretation and all that. They have what the system called the HCD, human. I can't remember what it actually stands for exactly, but human. There's an HCD intervention which really has to do with the user interaction with trying to make it more human, but that kind of applies downstream. But with the first system, interpretation is core. It happens, it's like upstream. It's intertwined with the system. So you talked about output, interpretation, and accountability. That's those are central in the file system. And it's about communication. Yes, I agree. It is about communication, and so we study it as a tool of science communication and also a subject of communication. And then authority is also important in the modern day AI algorithmic system. The authority is really the algorithm. I've been a victim of that many ways in different settings, making applications, and the algorithm will just present a roadblock after which you can't go through. Maybe something like, oh, you should have filed your taxes before a certain time, and I'm trying to explain, okay, the reason why I couldn't do it is because there was legitimate reason why I couldn't. I was this place, I was that place. Yeah, the system told me that I don't have to do it immediately, but the algorithm doesn't understand that, that kind of thing. So the authority in the FAST system, it's placed on the human, in the elders and in the community. So
sorry to interrupt you, but
right.
I just mindful of time, and so I just also want to give other people in the audience a chance to comment or also raise questions.
Okay.
So right now we've got 2 hands up, Daniel and Yantina. So we'll take those 2 together.
Okay.
And then you can offer some fun, and then maybe we'll try see if we can get another round of comments and questions. So Daniel.
All right.
Daniel? Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so then I go. I was gonna say Jantina can go, but it is okay. So thank you very much. I think it's worth the effort to put all these ideas together. A lot of value. I put in the chat just some of the ideas that I wanted to comment as I was listening. But as you made more comments, let me come with others. So you were talking about quality, and definitely, okay, let me put the frame. The new technological paradigm, the new technological and computational paradigm that is emerging, is raising questions. It's asking us to think from new perspectives in terms of mindedness. Okay, so that one as an intro, just to try to grab everything. You were talking about quality, and now we're seeing as density of information. We can talk about that one. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to stop there. And yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Daniel. Let's also take a question from Yantina, and then you can take them together, and then we can take another round if we can.
Great, yeah, and it sounds like Daniel is struggling with the same predicament as I am, which is that I would love to be in conversation with you more and for longer. I very much enjoyed that presentation, but I also found everything that you didn't have time to say. I was curious about everything that you didn't have time to say and what you would have said. I'm particularly intrigued by the connection that you make towards ethics. And you do that in your blog, I think, quite nicely as well, that original blog that Anye referred to, which is that this system sits within a very carefully curated idea about not just predicting the future, but also an ethics system that guides people as to who they should become, right? So, I mean, Anya and I sometimes in our conversations think a lot about the concept of world making as being productive in that sense. So these systems don't just predict the future, but they also tell people something fundamental about how to be a good human in the world. And so that to me fundamentally is about ethics. And I'd be keen to hear a bit more about how that happens in the IFA system. But then towards the end, and especially the slide that you have up now, I'm starting to wonder, I'm based in a hospital and in the clinic, and I'm starting to wonder whether the adoption of AI in the clinic is of this kind, because it cannot exist. I don't think cannot feasibly exist without careful engagement with medical health professionals, people with deep expertise in an area of illness, for instance, and so on. And so I'm wondering if what we are seeing is actually starting to morph towards, that IFA system of embedded and essential algorithms that are in dialogue with other areas of practice, bodies of knowledge, and so on and so forth. But that's just a thought. But I enjoyed your talk and also the possibility of deeper scholarship in this area.
Thank you very much, Janita and George. I think I really very much enjoyed your basically you asking a question, but you are actually making contributions. Both of you, really important contributions. And I'll say this up front. This is something that almost started as a hobby. I'm not doing it for any particular institution. It's just really independent research, and I do look forward to exploring it a lot more in more detail with opportunities with the institution or whatever. And what you mentioned, I think both of you are basically, talking about the current computational paradigm and then how it could be improved. In the area of healthcare, I think it's probably the IFA system has that. That's probably where the IFA system could contribute the most, as I'm thinking about it right now, because really, it's about care, right? It's about the human, and the IFA system, like I mentioned in the talk, was that although the individual, consults the system, it's the ultimate outcome. It's not just for the individual; it's to make the individual be in harmony with community. It's very important. That's why many times the elders are involved, the community is involved, especially if it's a decision that has to be made that affects the whole community. So there's that interpretative labor, should I use that phrase, that's involved, that is critical, crucial. It's not an add-on, it's not on the margins, it's central to the whole system. And that's where wisdom comes in, wisdom from the ancestors, community wisdom, like Fanon, the quote I mentioned, it says the community has its own light, its own knowledge that's different from individual knowledge and wisdom. So in the healthcare situation, I think it's, definitely the community of healthcare practitioners, they have to have input. They have to find a way to bring that human element into it. It cannot just be an automated output from an algorithm. You're dealing with human beings. Yeah, algorithms do great things, but when it comes to caring for an individual and all that, every human being every patient is unique. every patient is unique. So I do really understand the need for more human input into the structure of AI, especially when it comes to healthcare. And let me just say this because time is running out, that I'm available for discussions offline. I'll leave my email address with Anye. I'm very open. I have an open door policy. Anybody can get in touch with me. We can, share emails. We can even have chats. You can even have a video meetings when it's convenient for both of us. So I'm really available because there's so much to talk about. I don't have all the answers. I'm just really curious, and I just stumbled across something I thought that was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Uyi. And yeah, I think there's definitely interest. I can see from the chat room, people who are working in similar domains. And I think, I think many of us are united in the broad question of, what is Africa's place in the global discourse of science and innovation? And I think, trying to see how we can leverage the African archive, whether that's culturally, economically, politically, to think about some of these issues is definitely a conversation, not just for now, but definitely an ongoing one. I think I'll try to see if we can maybe I can read out one question that we've got in the chat room, and then maybe we can close things off there. So we've got a question from Geki. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Yeah, what do you think of efforts to connect between contemporary AI / LLMs and Ifá? So the custom Ifá GPT someone worked on, could this be a useful or productive endeavor in valorizing these knowledges, or is it futile?
Right. Sorry, the last part talks about validating. Did you say validating?
Valorizing it. Could this be a productive
Valorizing,
endeavor in valorizing these knowledges, or is it futile?
Okay, that's making the connection between AI and LLMs and systems like IFA, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I think there's a very important paper I read in Science Journal. If you go to my blog post with the LSE, I don't know if maybe some Anya can share it. It talks about, there was an article that talks about, coming together different LLMs and language systems and large language LLMs and other systems coming together to create, new knowledge and being able to what's the word now? See the weakness in one and the strength in other. Help each other out and come up with something bigger. I think that's really the future. Yes, but the most important thing is that the first system, yes, it's computational, it's algorithmic, but that's just one aspect of it. It's more than that. It's difficult to explain. It contains a lot of other things as well, and you really cannot just remove the computational system away from it and just say that's IFA. No, it's not. It's part of a larger system, but it is computational. It is algorithmic. It is procedural. It's structured. There's a lot that IFA can probably learn from other systems, and other systems can learn from IFA. Absolutely, I agree with that. I think that's probably the future, the way forward.
Thanks, Uyi. And I think that's actually a good note to end on, which is that, at least I think to stress the bi-directional nature of the kinds of conversations that we are looking to foster here at the Ethics Lab, and I think which you are certainly contributing to. So it's when we talk about how the knowledge from Africa or the African humanities can inform how we think about ethics. I think we are looking for, I think the current technological moment is an exciting opportunity to think about empirical, conceptual, and theoretical extension that can happen both ways. So similarly, what opportunities are there to extend how IFA is understood, but also as you've taken care to illustrate today, what can modern AI and the modern and yeah, learn from the IFA system. So I think on that note, I want to thank you very much. Well, I want to end on that note and thank you very much for giving us your time today and for contributing to a very stimulating discussion. And we'll be paying close attention to this work in progress. I mean, the ideas that you're sharing, both in written form and even in this talk right now, are really tantalizing, and yeah, it'd be exciting to remain in dialogue. I'm sure I speak not just for myself, but for everyone who's participated today, who's joined us today. Thank you all for joining us, and yep, I hope you all have a great day further and a weekend. So thanks to Uyi and thanks to all of you, and please look out. I've shared. You can find more information about our upcoming events at the lab here on our website. We have opportunities for several different funded and unfunded opportunities for collaboration. So you can visit our website, or you can also connect with us on LinkedIn. This event is recorded, so we will that recording will be posted on our website, and we'll try and curate a sort of blog discussion to sort of probe some of some of the key questions and provocations. Try probe that a little further. So yeah, let's keep in touch, and thank you all once again.
Thank you.